Good morning, faithful listeners. You have tuned in to the P40 Ministries podcast, the one place where you can get a daily explanatory Bible reading to start your day strong. This is your host, Jenn, bringing you a brand new episode out of Genesis. Good morning, faithful listener. I hope you had a fantastic Christmas. And I bet you guys noticed that I still have the Christmas intro up, but that is because I like it so much that I just don't want to get rid of it yet. I've only done it for a week, and I really like that score. And that was made by Sky Productions, and you can get that on Envito. But I really enjoyed the score that I got from them and just want to use it for a little bit longer. Now, sorry if you hear some humming in the background of this podcast episode. That is because when I came upstairs, our heat doesn't work properly upstairs, and I have this little thermometer in the corner of my room up here. It says it is 56 degrees up here, and that is just a little bit too cold for me. So I have a heater running, and I am not turning it off because I am freezing. So sorry if you hear the humming of the heater. Now, we're going to start reading verses 27 through 34 of Genesis chapter 25. After Genesis chapter 25, we are actually going to be halfway done with Genesis, and I can't believe that. It seems like it's just flying by. And Genesis is a really large book of the Bible, so we are really making good headway here in Genesis. So go ahead and turn in your Bibles to Genesis chapter 25, verses 27 through 34. And today we are going to be discussing how Esau sells Jacob his birthright. The boys grew. Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, but Jacob was a quiet man living in the tents. Now Isaac loved Esau because he ate his venison, but Rebekah loved Jacob. One day Jacob boiled some stew. Esau came in from the field and he was famished. Esau said to Jacob, "Please feed me with some of that red stew, for I am famished." Therefore his name was called Edom. Jacob said, "First, sell me your birthright." And Esau said, "Behold, I am about to die. What good is a birthright to me?" And Jacob said, "Swear it to me first." And he swore it to him. He sold his birthright to Jacob. So Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew. And he ate and he drank, rose up and went his way. So Esau despised his birthright. For many years, I've heard this story several times throughout my entire life. This is also a famous story to teach to children in Sunday school. So I remember hearing about this when I was a kid, but I was always like, what's the big deal? Like, what's the big deal that Esau sold his birthright? Who cares? But it wasn't until recently when I wrote a post about this, and I wrote that post for Hello Mornings, but I was really researching why this was such a bad thing. And let me read a little bit of that post that I wrote, and I'm just going to read a tiny bit of it. It says, "When I was 9 years old," and this is a true story that I actually wrote about myself. "When I was 9 years old, my family hosted a foreign exchange student from Germany. During his stay with us, his mother would send him care packages, and she sometimes included gifts for me. That Christmas, she sent me some chocolate in an advent calendar. Each door was numbered, and on the inside was a different Bible verse relating to Christ's coming. However, I was much more interested in the chocolate that sat behind the doors, and I ate it all in one sitting, not bothering to read the scriptures or gain anything from the advent calendar other than a stomach ache. And I learned a hard lesson. Instant gratification isn't always so gratifying." But in Genesis chapter 25, verses 29 through 34, we read how Esau does the exact same thing and sells his birthright to his younger brother. This was nothing but instant gratification for Esau. He wasn't thinking ahead about what this birthright might mean. And, the birthright, and I'm coming back away from the post and now just talking to you guys. Now, the birthright was something that God really placed a lot of responsibility on, the birthright holder. And that is because the birthright holder was the firstborn son. Not only would he become the leader of his family when his father died, he would also gain a double share of the possessions of the family, and he'd become the spiritual leader as well. He would decide what God or gods his family served. Now, Esau didn't care about any of this stuff. He didn't care about that responsibility because it was a really big responsibility. Esau was more focused on having a full stomach than about the things that were about to come, where he would have to provide for his family and make sure that they are spiritually following God. And it was just a huge responsibility. Every single person in his family, whether they're servants or family members or children or brothers or sisters, they would all become the birthright holder's responsibility. And Esau hated that. He didn't want anything to do with that. It says Esau despised his birthright. And God placed a lot of importance on the birthright. And we see that Jesus is called the birthright holder in, I think it's Ephesians is where it says that. But, Jesus was a birthright holder, and he took that responsibility greatly. Like he came to earth and he saved humanity. So he was the birthright holder, and he did his job well. The birthright was supposed to signify Jesus Christ, and Esau despised it and decided that he only wanted instant gratification instead. And so when he takes that stew from Jacob in exchange for his birthright, he's saying, what good is this birthright to me? And he actually just says that. He says that in verse 32. But the difference is Jacob knew how great of a responsibility the birthright was. He wanted that for himself, and not just necessarily for the double share of the possessions that he would receive with the birthright, but he also knew the responsibility of taking care of his family. And maybe he thought Esau wasn't going to do a good job. And clearly he wasn't going to do a good job because Esau didn't care about his responsibilities. So Jacob knew this, and Jacob is doing exactly what his name means. He's being a little shisty. He's being a little shady. He's being a heel catcher. So he's tricking Esau into selling that birthright to him. Jacob had something that Esau wanted. Jacob had that delicious stew that probably smelled great when Esau came home from probably many days without food in the wilderness while he was hunting. And he smelled that delicious smelling stew that his brother was making. And he wanted that. He wanted that right then and right there. He didn't want to wait another hour for himself to make a stew. He just wanted the one that Jacob had. And Jacob knew this and tricked him into selling his birthright. But Esau shouldn't have been tricked in the first place. He should have been like, no, that birthright is very important to me. I want to be the person who God made me to be and be responsible for my family after our father dies. But he doesn't do that. He's just like, what good is a birthright to me? I can't wait another hour to make myself some food. I am just going to give it to you. So he doesn't care. He despises everything that God had made him to be as the firstborn son. He doesn't care about God's plan for himself or for his family in the future. He doesn't care. And that is why God never cared for Esau either. Esau despised what God had given to him. And it says later on, I can't even remember where, but it says later on that God rejects Esau. Because of all of this, he rejects Esau because Esau rejected what God had given to him. So in verse 34, it says, finally, Jacob gave Esau some bread and the lentil stew, and Esau ate and drank, rose up, and went his way. He didn't even care. He just goes and leaves, doesn't think twice about this precious gift that he just sold to his brother for some stew. Now, I kind of jumped ahead a little bit. There is something else that I should mention here. In verses 27 and 28, it says that Jacob was a quiet man living in the tents, and Esau was a skillful hunter. Now, Isaac, their father, loved Esau more because Esau would go out and get him this delicious venison and all this delicious meat and cook it for him. But it says that Rebekah, their mother, loved Jacob more. And that was maybe because of the promise that she knew God had given to her when the boys were still in her womb. Or it could just be because he was a quiet kid that stayed around and helped his mother out, because they had two very different personalities as boys. So I just want to mention that as well, because that is a big part of the story that is about to come up. So friends, this was the end of Genesis chapter 25. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. There was a lot in it, all the way from Abraham's death to his grandchildren growing up and being ridiculous to each other. So that is Genesis chapter 25. Now, on Wednesday, I'm going to have a recap episode. And that is mainly because we are halfway through Genesis and I want to let everybody know who is new exactly what is going on and help you guys remember a little bit. So that will be a recap episode on Wednesday. But join me tomorrow and on Thursday, 6 a.m., and we will be in Matthew. And I think we're actually in Matthew chapter 10 now, so we're getting towards the middle of Matthew as well. So we're just flying right along in the Bible. Now, friends, I know that Christmas is over, but I still have my shop open. And if you want to support P40 Ministries financially, that would be an awesome way to do so. I have some great items in that store. I have some new items that are going to be coming out pretty soon, kind of with a Valentine's theme, so stay tuned for that. And I will put a link to my store in the bio of this podcast episode so you can easily find it. But thank you guys so much for listening and for tuning in. I want you guys to have a happy new year that's coming up pretty soon. But as I say at the end of every podcast episode, happy listening and God bless.